role it played during the pandemic. Our industry very much rose to the occasion, ensuring that the production of very essential products continued during the pandemic. Now, industry's efforts were supported by government, who never actually asked manufacturing to close. It was able to stay operational. And as the second lockdown looms, it's great to see that actually as our sector will be able to remain open once again. Now, together, the industry overcame both human and economic barriers to keep working and to keep supply chains functioning. And much of what was possible is due to the transformation of the sector in recent decades, with a more agile digital sector, which has increasingly been deploying smart solutions to address the challenges of the day. And this included adapting to the ways in which manufacturers worked during the pandemic, and in particular during lockdown. Now, for those employees that could work from home, predominantly office-based staff, manufacturers were quick to set this up. In fact, 94% of companies successfully had staff working remotely during the lockdown period. Now, this is an industry often associated with more manual tasks and a high proportion of production-based staff, so perhaps surprising to a lot of the audience today. Now, for production-based staff, things changed for them too. So we had new ways of using rotas, shifts, splitting up into teams, and it'll be really interesting to hear maybe from Will later on what Warren Services did during lockdown. But things also changed for production staff. So we had use of more technology-based efforts, such as through the use of virtual commissioning and 3D avatars. So loads of great examples of how companies kept operational during lockdown. And it's fair to say that manufacturers benefited from this way of working. So our research showed that the main benefit was making it easier to adhere to social distancing guidelines that were put in place. But also there were wider benefits, including improved communications and productivity gains. So day-to-day office management, once thought only accessible via kind of face-to-face contact, continued through platforms such as Zoom, like we're using today. Communication between staff was made normal through the use of meeting, chat rooms, and almost that ability to be moving through departments at work. There was also public benefit to employers by changing the way they work. So by creating environments where social distancing was enabled, by reducing multiple interactions between employees, by operating in these team ways, and operating plant machinery and production lines remotely, meant that actually the sector played its role in mitigating any possibilities of a second wave and trying to keep as many employees employed in the sector as possible. There are then clearly benefits to industry applying these new ways of working for their staff and using digital technology during lockdown. And the pandemic has changed this considerably. So 8 in 10 manufacturers plan to continue to utilise more of these smart and digital ways of working. Arguably, remote working was gaining some traction during the pandemic, but for industries such as manufacturing, we are now seeing this realisation of its full potential. So let's then talk about skills, and anyone knows me there knows I love to talk about skills, and I know Will and the rest of Warren Services love to talk about investing in people and skills. So almost 2/3 of manufacturers have invested in some form of digital training in the last 12 months. And what's really interesting, as you'll see on the screen here, is actually the smallest companies, so the micro businesses, as well as the largest companies that had invested in digital skills. So I think an interesting point maybe for both Will and Rob to pick up later. So whether it was attending virtual trade exhibitions or even hosting virtual meetings, to the same effectiveness as face-to-face calls, still required a basic level of digital skills. Now, for those who were perhaps using 3D avatars for sustainable sampling and undertaking virtual commissioning, a more advanced set of digital skills were required, and skills that could only be required through training, whether internally or externally. And this investment really had paid off. So our research found that around 9 in 10 companies said that investing in skills in this way put them in an advantage during lockdown, and really underline the fact that actually digital skills are increasingly vital for the manufacturing industry. Digital skills are clearly paramount to the success of the UK manufacturing's response during the crisis, and upskilling and reskilling more widely are critical importance for manufacturers across the board as we begin to think about the new normal. But worryingly, a third of manufacturers have not actually invested in any form of digital skills training. Now, for many, this will ring some alarm bells, and I can see Will shaking his head as we speak now. You know, digital skills are increasingly becoming a requirement for manufacturing businesses, not just simply a nice to have. Of course, when we say digital skills, we're possibly opening a bit of a can of worms with the spectrum of digital skills that's available. So you're ranging from the very basic to the more advanced. And there's some great case studies in our report, including from Leonardo, that does a bit of a deep dive into what are those skills that actually businesses need. And understanding what a business needs is really important. So manufacturers continue to report that the training and education system isn't keeping pace with the demands of the industry. But the question is, are manufacturers themselves also articulating what they really need? So earlier this year, we did some research and it showed a lot of can't even get it out, that employers were not pleased with the level of digital content in apprenticeships, or that training providers were not delivering the more digital provision that they needed. But there is also a question to be had for employers to the extent to which they are engaging with those education providers, with colleges and with universities to tell them what they need. If we want to create a responsive training provider, we need those two parties to indeed come together. And skills and training is, of course, always at the top of the agenda for any policy discussion with manufacturers. Today, the case for enabling a more tidal surge of digital skills is really overriding. And in our third webinar of this series, we'll be looking into the policy recommendations we put forward in this report. Now, acquiring digital skills can lead to major benefits. So we've seen some of those shorter term benefits during lockdown and the pandemic in terms of increased productivity and communications, but there's also longer term benefits to be had too. So Make UK research previously found that a lack of digital skills was the biggest barrier to adoption of industrial digital technologies, which themselves can reap major benefits in terms of productivity and efficiency gains. But if businesses can't find the digital skills they need, they will begin to fall behind the rest of the world as it presses ahead of the adoption of digitalisation. And it's thanks to the fourth industrial revolution and those that have seized upon it that the manufacturing industry is in fact a bit unrecognisable to how it was 30 years ago. And in another few decades, the contrast will be even greater. We know that digitalisation can be a great leveller as more and more businesses are able to realise the potential of new technologies. And this starts really with developing our people and ensuring nobody is left behind. So with this in mind, I think the big question is, are digital skills at the forefront of your training strategy as a manufacturer? We know that almost half of companies have already changed their training strategies in light of COVID-19, but where do digital skills sit in all of this? And I think on that note, it's a really great time to hand over to Will Bridgman of Warren Services, who's going to talk about the importance of digital skills and what they've been doing over at their company.
Good morning. Oh no, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Will Bridgman. I'm the chairman of Warren Services. We're a family manufacturing business based in Thetford, Norfolk. We're 30 years old this year. It was meant to be a year of celebration, of parties. Obviously, that's been put on hold due to COVID. Verity said earlier, about how we've had to change as a business during this period. And, we operate heavy plant. We've got a CNC machine shop, a paint shop, assembly. Those people can't work from home. So we had to very quickly, we already worked over a number of shifts over 2 different sites. So we had to split those people up into individual pods. So we had 4 pods that didn't mix. And we sent home as many people as we possibly could, which was relatively easy for us because we've got the IT infrastructure to deal with that because we had home working in place already. So it was just a matter of accelerating that. But it wasn't easy because all of a sudden everyone was gone. And there were issues and connectivity. And probably one of the biggest challenges for us was people's home connectivity. nothing to do with our business infrastructure. So we've had to look at improving some of that connectivity for our employees. But from a digital skills and a training point of view, you know, we've been on this journey for 20 years. You know, that's why I laughed a little bit when Verity was saying about the report that, you know, I think sometimes people don't realize that they are embracing digital transformation and digital skills, because everything involves digital nowadays. So I think there's lots of different levels, you know, whether with us, we have a browser-based system where the staff log in and out of the factory and on and off the jobs, and they find their drawings by their workstation. You know, for older members of staff, that's a change. If they've been used to using a paper drawing, they've now got access to a digital drawing and 3D models that actually in their home life, they don't interact with a computer in that way. You know, they might look at an iPad, or they might use you know, some streaming applications for watching sport or watching films. But, you know, those small things where like younger members of our workforce would think, well, obviously anyone knows how to use a computer, you know, that's like, you know, the most basic thing in the world. So I think this level of skills training, it's important to make sure that we understand, you know, people need this certain base level that then opens up all the other opportunities to them. But it's a bit controversial, but I don't actually think we've got a digital skills problem in the UK. I think we've got a leadership problem. And when I looked at the list of things, and it said, I think number 5 was change culture. All the biggest challenges in digital transformation are not about money and not about technology and not about skills, are about change management. And that's been the same for 100 years. You know, when I talked to my granddad, who was an apprentice engineer at Vickers that became British Aerospace, you know, engineering's always evolving. This is just another evolution, and it's about us understanding how to manage change management. And our leaders of our engineering businesses are looking in the wrong place. You know, they're looking at their management team to solve these digital problems. They just need to ask some young people within the business. They're digitally native. They, you know, they're inbred with it. They want to make their lives easy. You know, the technology is there. And if you let these young people run with these problems, I don't think digital skills would be so much of a problem. Thanks, Verity.
Thanks, Will. And we'll now pass over to Rob from Sage.
Good morning, good afternoon. I did the same thing as Will. Thank you for that, Will. So what I want to start off with is a profound quote that I saw from a CIO of a manufacturer that was published last month, which really said that COVID wrote the business case. Our future is digital. I don't think that we could ever have predicted what the impact of COVID would have been. And I mean, 2020 is going to be that year that we'll never forget. We'll be talking about it in the same way that our parents and our grandparents talk about what happened in the 60s and after the world wars and things like that. So it's changed everything. What's interesting, though, is that companies that laid the foundations of cloud and agility and strategic partnerships that were laid before this were ready to respond with digital solutions. Those that hadn't have been scrambling and have flailed to some degree and been treading water trying to get moving. It's interesting to see that last year, 85% of firms viewed digital as a nice to have. Yeah, we'll get there eventually. In 2020, every company learned that digital is absolutely critical, and it's something that we're going to have to be focusing on. I mean, we look at the pace of change that we've seen. It's speeding up. We see this thanks to the cost of data. We're now in a situation where data used to be expensive. Data storage used to be expensive. Now it's cheap as chips. You can store data in AWS for $7 a month. That's roughly £5 per month for a terabyte. A terabyte is enough to store 10 4K Ultra HD movies. Most UK businesses, interestingly enough, have broadband or infrastructure that can support streaming of 2 of these movies simultaneously. So we're not in an age where that should be a concern for everybody. Everybody should be running on the latest technology. But as we go forward, digitization is going to be the great leveler. It's going to level the playing field for everybody. It's going to offer any business, regardless of their size or their opportunity, it's going to allow them to compete with bigger rivals and markets that they may never have actually been able to compete in or dominate. What's interesting is that some research that we carried out as Sage has showed that there has been a profound shift over the last 6 months, with 73% of small and medium-sized businesses investing in technology, and 67% of them saying that they would like to be in a position to go forward further. And why are they doing this? Well, technology supports efficiency, effectiveness, and ultimately productivity, which will allow them to connect with their customers and their partners around the world and collaborate more easily. And once you achieve collaboration, you heard from Will that people are able to work remotely, they're able to interact with each other. Verity mentioned the fact that there are virtual engagements taking place all over the world. These are incredible things, and we do take for granted. I know I certainly take for granted logging into Teams and logging into Zoom for a call like this, but even I would say a seasoned digital professional like myself was still struggling to figure out how to put a snappy background in Zoom. So it's not that easy, and it does show the importance of investing in training, but also more importantly, investing in understanding the tools that we have. It's not necessarily about going out on a big push and making sure that everybody is an industry 4.0, big data, artificial intelligence expert. It's about understanding what tools you have and making sure that people are proficient in those tools. Familiarity breeds the ability to do things more quickly, the ability to do things more rapidly. Will gave the example of people at home using streaming services. You give a 3-year-old an iPad today and they can pick it up and they just instinctively know how to do things on these tablet devices. But that's not because they intuitively understand. It's because these apps and the way that they use things have been designed in an intuitive way. And it's about companies delivering capabilities to their employees that are both easy to understand, but also purpose-built for what they're trying to do. So I think this is going to be a huge opportunity for us as we go forward, in that we support manufacturers on this journey and allow them to invest in digital upskilling, but digital upskilling with a purpose rather than just investing in it for the sake of investing in it.
Thanks, Rob. And it's good to know that my 18-month-old, when he can use an iPad and manage to watch Teletubbies on Sky Go, it's all because it's all designed for him, rather than I've just been giving him an iPad when things are getting tough. We've got some comments and questions that have come in. I think there's been a lot of interest in how manufacturing industry has made this shift, but a comment was around why has it taken a pandemic to really get manufacturers thinking in this way and operating on these kind of models. So I don't know, Will, you might say it hasn't taken a pandemic, we've been doing it for ages, but it seems for the large number of companies, it has taken a pandemic to actually get them to think how we work differently.
Yeah, I think it didn't take us. We've been on this journey for many, many years, whether that be, our 30-year-old apprenticeship program or our digital transformation that started 20 years ago. But I think a lot of manufacturing businesses were happy doing what they were doing. If it's not broke, let's not try and fix it. Actually, we like to disrupt ourselves. We love change. We love smashing up our business model because we understand that, things are going to change. I'm 43. I'm going to be doing this for another 30 years. So I don't want to be disrupted I don't want to be the bookseller that had its business destroyed by Amazon. I want to be involved in leading part of that change. And manufacturing is going to change and it's becoming more digital. The pandemic has sort of shone a light on certain tools, but realistically only certain tools, a lot of communication, a lot of home working, but still lots of companies are not really looking at it in a fundamental way of, you know, are we collecting accurate data? Are we using the data? Are we joining the data together? Have we got people in the business that understand the value of that data and making decisions based on data rather than gut instinct? You know, we are a family business, you know, 110 staff, you know, traditional engineering business, but, you know, we do try and use the data more and more and more rather than our gut instinct, which is quite common in manufacturing. And actually, you realize, you know, as engineers, we love new machines. All manufacturing companies love a new machine, but actually we don't need to buy new machines that are 5% faster, because we're actually, when we look at the data, we're only using the machines 50% of the time, the ones we've got. So if we used our digital skills and our data to organize ourselves more effectively, we could use the current equipment and make ourselves much more profitable. So I think the pandemic has definitely accelerated the use of, you know, online communication tools, because travel has been restricted, people are working away from the office, but I don't think it's necessarily, you know, being exploited to drive any more value than that in a lot of businesses.
And Rob, from the companies you work with, have you seen a bit of a shift? Have you seen a few more kind of queries and questions coming in from companies who now are looking at operating differently?
I think we have seen a shift, and to give a little bit of positivity, because we're always very down on British manufacturing, we've seen a shift across the globe. We've seen companies in France, we've seen companies in Germany who've always been held up as these emblems of efficiency and being ahead of the curve, and the Industry 4.0 was really started in Germany as a concept. But interestingly enough, it's a common challenge across the globe with manufacturing, that manufacturers have always seemed to find efficiency through other investments. So Will mentioned this drive to invest in new machinery. I come from an engineering background. My dad was an engineer, worked for Mather and Platt as an apprentice, and has his. We have our base in the north. But what I can say is that despite this drive to continue to invest in new machinery, digital technologies and adoption of digital technologies is not something that we've all of a sudden just switched on to. I think that there are a lot of British manufacturers that have already been investing in digital technologies and have been going down the right path. And as a result, we're seeing a number of different successful British manufacturers kind of stand up and be recognized globally for the work that they've done. And a number of them are called out in the report that you refer to. But yes, there has been a little bit of a lackadaisical approach to this. As I said, research shows that up to 85% thought of digital transformation or adoption of digital strategies as a nice to have last year. I can almost bet that every single person that's on this call now has digital transformation right at the top of their agenda. But the interesting thing is, digital transformation doesn't have to be the seismic shift that everybody thinks it is. And that's the mistake that everybody makes. It's you're either on or you're off, or we've either digitalized everything or we're not. Digital transformation at its very core is about identifying those areas in your organization and using technology to support them, drive even small efficiencies. Even a 5% efficiency gain is significant. And this is the thing, we tend to see this as either this massive overarching challenge that companies have to tackle, whereas picking a couple of processes and focusing in on those processes and going, let's improve here, let's improve there, let's improve here, will yield massive gains, which you can then use as a foundation to go on from there. And I'm sure if we turn that to Will, he wouldn't say that, oh yeah, we just transformed the entire business overnight. It's probably been an incremental journey with small gains, but those incremental gains are really what set you apart. I'll use the example of British cycling and what Brailsford did with Team Sky. He went in there and he looked at what they had, and they had the best infrastructure, and they were doing okay, but they were never really excelling. And what he introduced was this concept of incremental gains, 1% every day. And before you realize it, you've got 25, 30, 40, 50, 60% of gain without having to go through the seismic shift and disrupt the entire business. It's not called, it was previously called digital disruption. Now it's called digital transformation. And the reason is that you don't need to disrupt the entire business. We're being disrupted enough by COVID and by other geopolitical and macroeconomic factors. Why change the entire foundation of the organization? Incremental gains is how people will be able to do this.
And is that what's happening over at Warren Services World? Is it incremental gains?
Yeah, I couldn't echo that. That's exactly how we've done it. And we've made a number of mistakes, and that's because we tried to do too big a thing in one go. The biggest thing I've probably learned from this whole journey, which is a journey, and the journey will never end. It will always, there will always be something we can improve. And I've learned, the agile model of developing these digital tools and the idea of minimum viable product, that we now as a business we only want to spend, we have our own Warren Web, we call it, which is a cloud-based platform that's got specific tools that we've built for viewing drawings or adding inspection documentation or clocking on and off of jobs, or we've got a task system. But whenever we want to add functionality to that, we don't want to spend any more than 10 to 15 hours of development time releasing that, and we release it as rough as possible, so as a minimum viable product, and then the users use it, and then they shape the transformation of that product into something that they see value in. So we might release every 2 weeks an improvement to what they're using, so then it gets the buy-in of the user. If you try and, people say, oh, what should I do? I'm thinking of changing my ERP system. I'm like, definitely don't do that. Not as the first thing. Pick something small, because you want people to learn to transform as well. If you try and drop a massive change on them right from the start, it's not going to go well, and there's going to be pushback and people are going to get upset. Where if you sort of drip, and then it affects the welding department, and then some of another department, and then a little bit more functionality, and something else comes along, and then especially if you listen to their feedback and shape the development around their feedback, using this agile model. And then it really builds that they want to learn, they want to be part of that transformation. That's why I said it's around change management. So Rob was exactly right. Definitely do not pick some like waterfall approach where you spend tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds doing something, and then go, right, there you go, it's all ready, get on with it, because it will fail. And I think there's statistics around 80% of that type of project fall over at a very, very high cost to both financial and staff buy-in. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I think that begins to touch upon another question that's come through around, so some workers sometimes have some reluctance of when companies want to adopt new kind of digital technologies. It's always that fear of robots taking over my job, or then if you have to send workers who have been working in your business on these new digital skills training courses, they can feel a bit nervous. What do we do to overcome those fears and bring employees with us on the digital journey?
Don't send people away that fear going away, because you're just going to wind them up and they're not going to like it. What we try and do is get someone that becomes a sort of product champion in each area. So if you've got a team of welders, we've got a young welding manager. So he's quite digitally savvy. He wants to embrace the new stuff. And then rather than letting the Go Digital team have to train everyone, they can train and get them the manager on board. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the manager. It could be just a team member. And then you can get them on board. And then they've got their co-workers and then talk to them. And, if you start saying, oh, you've got to go away on this course and you've got to do an exam, and, especially older workers do get freaked out by that. They went to school 40 years ago. They don't want to be sitting in a classroom, where they feel uncomfortable. You have to base the training strategy. I'm very, very lucky. I've got the guy that heads up our Go Digital team, has been in the business 20 plus years, worked in lots of areas of the business, and is good at training people. I'm the worst trainer in the world. You know, if I tell someone once that I've told you how to do it now, and I've got one way of telling people, so I don't train anyone because I'm useless. But I know that I've got a team there that actually know how to communicate on an individual level with maybe an older member of staff or a younger member of staff, or someone that's like maybe more fearful of change. And sometimes you have to go back. You know, don't overload people. You know, some people will go, yeah, tell me it all, good, I've got it. If I've got any questions, I'll message you on Teams. Someone else, right, here's how this bit works. They come back a couple of days later, now you can do this bit, and, you know, build on that. There's not a one size fits all training method for digital skills. It's probably, yeah, you need to be super flexible in your delivery of how you do that. And there's no book you can read. You just do something small, make some mistakes, learn from it, and employ great people, you know, who have got better skills than you. If I was training the company in digital skills, we wouldn't be anywhere.
We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And Rob, what about you? You know, how do we make sure that workers feel like they want to come with businesses on their digital journey? What would be your kind of top tips for manufacturing companies looking to do this?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and you kind of highlighted it in the question, that there's this fear that we're all going to be replaced by robots. There's this idea that we're living in some sort of sci-fi world, and robots are going to take over. There are a couple of really innovative UK companies that I wanted to kind of highlight first of all. So there are a couple of companies that have started to develop advanced CNC software around how do we optimize the cuts that CNC machines can make. Because I think Will mentioned that they have a CNC machine there. I'm sure he would attest to there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands, millions of permutations that a CNC machine can make to cut out a square. You can approach it in so many different ways. Now, machines and robots will never replace a human being. They will be able to propose alternative routes, which may be more efficient based on a variety of different criteria. But at the end of the day, a seasoned CNC professional will need to be able to say, this is the way that we want to do it because we're looking for this, we're looking for that, we're looking for this. That human level of judgment is never going to be replaced. I mentioned this idea of overabundance of computing. I mean, there's some really crazy things. I did some basic coding when I was younger, and that's only going back 20 years ago. And the machines that we use today to code are roughly 75,000 times faster than they were 20 years ago, which is incredible. It's mind-boggling when you think about that. Now, what that means is it means technology is actually there to help people to do things faster, more efficiently, and to get more benefit. What we're seeing is people are now being required to make decisions about how to do things proactively, being aided by machines. So there's look at a great thing like a manufacturing execution system. Everybody thought MES was going to replace all of the people on the shop floor. Oh my God, MES is coming. The machines are going to run themselves. I'm not going to be needed. Well, human beings are still needed, because if there is a deficiency or a slowdown in efficiency or a drop in OEE values, someone still needs to be able to interpret that and look at the machine and say, it's because the raw materials that went in are wrong. Machines will never be able to do that. But the role of the human being is changing, and digital transformation is going to help people to become a conduit for making more proactive decisions rather than just being someone who does the work. People will actually proactively use their skills, expertise, knowledge, and know-how to add value to what the machine is doing. So instead of doing the mundane, boring tasks that they may have done before, they're going to be doing things like managing by exception, elevating the work of what the human being does above what the machine does. So humans won't be replaced. And there's a couple of interesting things about training as well. And this is probably one of my top tips is if you're going to train someone, allow them to apply that knowledge immediately. We see this all the time. We put people through training and then we don't let them actually work on the applications that we want. This is one of the reasons why ERP projects fail, because you train people up months in advance, you show them what it's going to look like, you promise them this panacea, and then they get there and it's not as streamlined, it's not as smooth, it's not as easy as they thought, which is why this approach that Will mentioned of incremental learning as you go, being agile in the training methodologies that you're using, I think is so important, because we all learn in different ways, and we'll see this more and more as we see people who are on the spectrum coming into the workforce, people who've got Asperger's, people who've got autism. As they come into the workforce, they learn differently, and we're seeing a lot of programs being kicked off in the UK that are designed to help these people learn, because they learn visually. Some people learn very well in that, do this, do that, you tell, and they do. Whereas other people, you need to show, they need to copy, and then they can do themselves. So it's a very different way of learning. So I would focus in on those two things: learn it, apply it, and show them, and then get them to do it. Because even if you're an auditory learner, by seeing someone else do it, you'll learn a lot more doing it that way.
Brilliant, thanks. And just a reminder to keep bringing in your questions on the Q&A. No, I think we all mentioned it before, and there's a question that's just come up around this on the kind of next generation being our digital natives. So if we are saying we've got a digital skills gap, we are talking about how we are adopting all of these wonderful digital technologies. Is it now the perfect opportunity just to be showing the next generation what manufacturing has to offer? You know, how can we do that? How do we sell ourselves in this kind of a newer world that actually might be really attractive to the next generation?
It's just hard work. We've got to embrace, you know, we've got apprenticeship, cut us in half, and we've got apprentice written around like a stick of rock. It's embedded within our business. The 30 years that Warren Services, my mother and father started the business, and the business my father ran before that, both my granddads were apprentices, my father was an apprentice, and those apprentices traditionally learned from more skilled people. That's been flipped around. They're still learning their, practical skills and, engineering skills, but they can bring their digital skills. So, we've had the pandemic, we're entering a second lockdown, but we as a business have continued to invest in apprenticeships. This year we've taken on 3 new apprentices in September. Apprentice start rates are definitely down, but we're not investing in apprentices for today. We're investing in apprentices for the next 10 years, next 20 years. So it seems foolish not to take advantage. And actually this year we probably had a pick of the lot, because certain other manufacturers would have been like, oh, I'm not really sure what we should do. And so I think we actually took one more than we were expecting to do, because the quality of the candidates were there, and they come with these skills. They're inherently digital, but they also come with, they're more closer to learning. They've come out of learning, so they're happy generally to continue that learning, and being an apprenticeship, they're learning, so they're happy to learn other skills, and whether they be specific, because their digital skills are shaped around like playing games or streaming stuff, or Facebook and stuff like that, which aren't, you could say, are not directly related to the problems within manufacturing and how we can improve our business, but they're just happy with technology. So I think the way to help the transformation is to continue our investment in apprentices and young people. And that's right, not just for digital, that's just right for your business. If you want your business to survive in the future, you need to embrace the apprenticeship program. And I think for manufacturing, it's the best method. People say to me, oh, you spend a lot of time at universities, at schools, we do a lot of work with our UTCN, but I say, oh, well, I don't pay a lot of recruitment fees. So people would say, oh yeah, you want to use a recruitment professional. I'm like, well, I'd rather spend my money working with young people and inspiring them into our industry, and connecting with them and making them, I'm working with some first year of A-levels, year 12 students at the moment. 3 of them already want a job at Warren when they leave at the end of year 13. So we've got a decent, and they're all smart. And I think the adoption of degree level apprenticeships, which is all still early stages, is a bit woolly around exactly how it's going to work in our sector, has started to allow us to get some really, really top caliber people, where they would have traditionally all gone to Russell Group universities, and then they would have left our region. They could have gone to London or gone to Birmingham or gone to Leeds and studied engineering, and then ended up working for BAE or working for Rolls-Royce or working for JLR, where people have got to work for JLR, they're a big Make UK member, but if we can keep them in the region, they're more likely to want to have a family, going to stay here, so it's that embracing that degree level apprenticeship program has definitely changed the type of people that we're able to attract into our business. But people have quite often said to me, oh, how come it's, you seem to be able to attract all these smart young people. I went to the school and nothing happened on it. Yeah, you went once. We've been going, every month for 10 years. It doesn't take 10 years, but, my father's an enterprise advisor at our local academy. It's to get the best people, you get out what you put in. And people, say, oh, I trained an apprentice and they left. Well, train some more. Or maybe you weren't attractive enough to keep them there. Look at your business. If you train people, they are generally quite loyal. They only leave because you've upset them in some way, or they don't see a future and they don't see you embracing technology. So I don't think there's any quick fixes to this. It's the commitment you put in is directly proportional to the quality of the people you get out. And we have got some amazing young people through our apprenticeship program that I know will lead the business in the future when I come to, I'm never going to stop working. I love this job. I love engineering, but they're going to be the ones leading the business. And, that's my father in particular, he's 73, 74. He gets such a kick out of seeing these young guys and girls that have entered the business as apprenticeships now in leadership roles. We've just literally promoted a guy that came into the business as a welder, stepped all the way through the business, and now has just joined the board as the operations director. And now he's got his sights long term on the MD's job. Rightly so. Our welding manager was one of our own apprentices. It's great. Great to breed your own and bring people in from outside as well. But it's like all manufacturing. You've got to do it smart, but it's directly proportioned to the effort you put in.
Brilliant. And I think on Thursday, when we have our second webinar looking at the kind of practical solutions and best practice of how to acquire digital skills, I think a lot of that will be really great to cover in a bit more detail. I'm conscious of time, and there's one, I think, question that I know specifically aimed at you, Rob, before we wrap up. That is actually, what are tech companies like Sage doing to help manufacturers move towards digital? Of course, we've discussed how there are many benefits, both experienced during the pandemic and more widely. But one of the questions we always get, obviously, is Make UK as well. How can you support us? How can you support your average manufacturing businesses to take advantage of this?
So it's a really good question, and it's one we get asked about all the time. I think there's a couple of different ways that I could answer this. The first one is that how do we help customers or help manufacturers as they go forward? So I'm going to first of all say that I think our industry have been guilty in the past of not necessarily helping businesses. And I call this out as an industry. I've worked for a variety of software companies. So it's a symptomatic challenge across the industry. I think we're great at delivering capabilities that are so comprehensive, but they're also incredibly complex, incredibly difficult to implement. Or the other thing that we do is we deliver these frameworks. We've delivered a framework that will allow you to integrate with IoT connected devices. Amazing. How do I do that? we haven't thought about the use cases and the scenarios. So there is a big change that is taking place in the industry right now, putting practical applications of technology at the forefront. So I know at Sage, one of the things that we're doing is everything that we're doing is built around our customers. It's built around personas. We put ourselves in the actual feet of our customers and our personas. And what we're trying to do is understand get empathy for their journey. So mapping out what their day looks like. What does a typical day in the life of someone look like? Obviously, it's slightly different now to what it was 6 months ago, and probably incredibly different to what it was 12 months ago. But this is something that we're constantly doing. The other thing that we want to do is leverage technology, not as a way of technology for technology's sake. I think that's where we've made the mistake in the past. So at Sage, for example, our purpose is to transform the way that people think and work so that their organizations can thrive. That sounds like a really interesting way of saying things, and it's one of those statements of grandeur, but really what it means is, how do we design our products and services so that they enable transformation? And one of the things that we want to do is we want to take advantage of all of this cheap infrastructure, this cheap data management capabilities, these cheap abundant computing capabilities that exist. And we want to acknowledge the way that people are doing the work today and acknowledge that that's going to change. The day-to-day job that someone's doing is going to change. But how do we then elevate that work of humans? So I touched on this a little bit earlier, management by exception. So of course, we believe that all humans will be able to do higher value work when we have digitized business models. So what we're doing is we're solving really two questions. One is, how do we enable our customers on their digital transformation journey, and how do we elevate the work of humans through what we call digital environments? And this is really important. It's about making sure that what can be automated is automated, creating seamless relationships between customer and supplier, between manufacturer and wholesaler, or manufacturer and their direct customer in the way that is easiest as possible. So you'll see this becoming more of a trend in the industry, I'm sure. It's certainly something that Sage is really focused in on, is using this and then taking advantage of all of the data that's being created to drive machine learning and to drive artificial intelligence, so that we shift from work to being proactive for people going forward. And I think that's how we're going to help manufacturers. The other thing that's important for manufacturers is start to think about the cloud. As I mentioned, the infrastructure in the UK is really strong. We have a unique opportunity to build on top of that. Start to look at cloud solutions. The cloud doesn't have to mean that everything is all in the cloud and it's only multi-tenant. It could be it's available through a browser on any device when you need it. That's what the cloud means. And it means that you don't have to have 20 IT people sitting in the back office looking after a server in the corner. Those days are gone. There are tons of ways of deploying the cloud. So ERP vendors and technology vendors are looking at how we deliver cloud experiences on demand, available on the device that you want in the way that you need it. What I would suggest is that you challenge your vendor very hard to understand what they can deliver. Will and I were talking about this a little bit earlier about some of the Sage capabilities that he's using. We're constantly evolving and looking to deliver new ways and new experiences for our customers. There's never been a better time to look at some of these technology investments than there is today. I know it's difficult. I know businesses are struggling, but guess what? Those that set themselves up now and invest and make that transition will be in a significantly better position than those that are trying to play catch up in 6 months. So my recommendation is challenge your vendor, be very open with them about what you need. And if they can support you, they will. If they can't, find someone out there who will support you. And hopefully that'll be Sage. But more importantly, how do we support the UK economy and keep manufacturing in the UK growing?
And I know Will's got a couple of comments before we wrap up, but I think definitely one of the things that we found from our research is that those companies that have invested, continue to invest, those companies such as Warren Services are then those that thrive during, things like the pandemic and keep going. And actually, we need to be planning for the future and not just the here and now. But Will, did you have a couple of final comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think just speaking to what Rob was talking about is with vendors, what we say now is we want it to be browser based, we want it to be subscription, and we want to have clean, open, well-documented APIs. And APIs, for people that aren't into that thing, it's just a way of connecting bits of software together. So we insist on browser-based, like Rob was saying, so you can operate from any device. You don't need anything installed on the machine. So it makes IT support, well, in a way, non-existent. You're just logging in from anywhere. We like subscription because there's no initial investment. There's investment in time and training, but if you buy something that costs a lot of money up front, you're then sort of stuck with that. Where I always think if you use a subscription-based model, it means the vendor, like Sage or whoever else, has got to be good all of the time because it's cheaper for you to move. You've still got, the onboarding and the training, but if you've invested 50,000 or 100,000 in some software, it's quite sticky. Where I want to be able to move if something better comes along. And then obviously the API part is around, we know that one vendor can't provide a complete solution. We want a mosaic solution that all stitches together, so we can have some custom software, we can have some core ERP, we can have, we use Autodesk for our engineering tools, but then we use Sage for accounts, we have a separate ERP, we have the MES that we've built ourselves on the shop floor. And it's about, understanding that you need to feel confident in stitching a solution together. And it's with decent APIs, it isn't as hard as it sounds. So yeah, I would say to everyone on any points, pick a small project that's causing you pain within your business and find a cheap solution, ideally led by the team that have got the problem, because then the buy-in is a lot easier.
I think that's a great tip, and I think loads of really great practical takeaways for the manufacturing industry to kind of go back and take back to their business. Well, we have come to the end of our webinar. I would say on that practical solutions point, if you want to find out a little bit more on how you can acquire digital skills, on Thursday we will be running the second of these webinars. And we'll be joined by Enginuity, the Sector Skills Council, formerly known as SEMTA, and the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. So we'll be doing a bit of a deeper dive into actually how you can acquire skills. So please do join us for that. And we will be hosting our final webinar on the 13th of November, where we will be looking at the policy recommendations that we were to take to government. So do join us for those. Just wanted to thank both Rob and Will for some real great insights and intelligence, and thank to everyone for joining today's webinar. If you haven't yet read the report, you can download it from our website. Do have a read, and as well as those kind of key findings, we've got some great case studies for companies like Will's that are doing some stuff in this area. So we can finally address that digital skills gap, although Will's going to argue with me that it doesn't exist. But thank you everyone for joining, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you.